Hey bookworms, welcome back to another deep dive. Today we're digging into a book I know so many of you love, Garden Spells by Sarah Addison Allen. And look, we're not just doing like a basic plot summary, okay?
Yeah.
We're going deeper.
Not all heroes are loud. Some quietly grow gardens, teach, and wait. You know, in a world so full of those big alpha love stories, Sarah Addison Allen, she gives us something a little bit different in Garden Spells, something softer and maybe even stronger.
It's so true, and I think that's a big part of why this book, Garden Spells, why it still resonates with so many people. It's not just a fun little escape with a touch of magic. It really digs into those deep desires we all have for connection, for security, but it does it in this way that feels both, whimsical, but also incredibly real.
Yeah, totally. It's refreshing, right? And at the heart of it all, we have these two sisters, Claire and Sydney Waverly. They're like two sides of the same coin, We have Claire, who's built this very quiet, very ordered life for herself in Bascom, North Carolina. She has her catering business, which is already interesting enough, but then there's this added layer. She uses ingredients from their family garden, the Waverly Garden, and it's magical, right? And she uses it in her cooking to subtly influence the emotions of whoever eats her food. Yeah. It's like she's created this little haven of safety and control for herself.
And you have to think about that need for safety, especially in the context of their family history. The Waverly women, they have this legacy of magic, but it's not always, predictable or safe. Even the way the town views them, it can be a bit fickle. So Claire creating this very structured routine, it's her way of dealing with that, her way of making sense of this world where the ordinary and the extraordinary are kind of constantly bumping into each other.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have Sydney, the younger sister, who went in a completely different direction. She left Bascom years ago, almost like she was running from that whole legacy. But then she comes back, and it's not on her own terms, She's bringing her daughter back to this place she tried so hard to leave behind. And her reason for coming back, well, it's actually very similar to Claire's, even though their paths have been so different. Sydney's looking for safety too, but she's running from something very real, something very dangerous and abusive relationship.
The contrast between those two is just fascinating. On the surface, they seem so opposite, right? You have Claire, who's all about control and order, and then you have Sydney, who's much more impulsive, living a little more on the edge. But when you look closer, they're both searching for the same things. A place to belong, unconditional love, and that feeling of being safe, truly safe in their own skin. It's just that Claire seeks it through controlling her surroundings while Sydney's having to rediscover it after going through something so traumatic.
Yeah.
Really makes you think about how different people, we all wear these different masks, but deep down, we're all striving for some of those same basic needs.
It makes you think, yeah. So when we look at their journeys, and I'm thinking specifically about how they find love, it really underscores that theme of softer strength, right? For Claire, that comes in the form of Tyler Hughes, the art professor who lives next door. It's not this big, dramatic, love at first sight kind of thing. Their relationship, it builds slowly, very gently, and with a lot of mutual respect.
Absolutely. And Tyler, his character is so crucial here. He doesn't try to bulldoze his way into Claire's life. He's incredibly patient. He takes the time to really see her, and he lets her set the pace. That's so important for someone like Claire, who's built up these walls around herself. His presence, it's calm, it's steady, and it becomes this source of safety for her. It allows her to, little by little, to start letting go of some of that control. It makes you wonder, how often do we see that in stories? Male characters who are really about that quiet strength, that understanding, as opposed to those more, those more typical heroic types who are always taking charge.
That's a good point. And then there's Sydney. Her journey toward finding love takes her back to someone from her past, Henry Hopkins. What do you think is the most important thing about their connection, especially given everything she's been through?
I think for Sydney, after experiencing abuse, finding safety in a relationship, it takes on this whole other level of importance, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about feeling secure emotionally, it's about feeling safe physically too. It's about being with someone who doesn't trigger those past traumas. And Henry, he just embodies this sense of stability. He's grounded, he's kind, and he sees Sydney for who she really is, all of her. The good and the bad, the strength she's gained from everything she's been through. He doesn't judge her, and he definitely doesn't try to control her. And I think the biggest thing for Sydney is that she finally learns that she can be loved and desired without fear. It's like she's reclaiming her own power, her own agency, and finding a love that's nurturing, not destructive.
Yeah, that's so well put. So neither sister finds love in this big sweeping way,
Yeah.
It's much more nuanced, much more about trust and respect and truly understanding each other's needs. And it's so intertwined with their own personal growth too. Claire learning to be vulnerable, Sydney learning to trust again. Those are the foundations that their relationships are built on.
Exactly. And I think that's where their individual magic comes in too. The way Claire can influence emotions through her cooking, and Sydney with her talent for bringing out people's beauty and confidence. That those things, they're not just little quirks or plot devices. They're expressions of their own power, their own ability to shape the world around them. It's subtle, but it's incredibly meaningful. They're taking ownership of their gifts, using them to create the lives they want, not letting those gifts define them or control them.
And we can't forget about the Waverly Garden itself. It's more than just a setting, right? It's almost like a character in the story woven into the family history and both Claire and Sydney's journeys.
Oh, absolutely. The garden, it represents so much. It's a symbol of their lineage, this long line of Waverly women who had this connection to nature, to these intuitive gifts. It represents the cycles of life, the way things grow and change and renew themselves, which mirrors the transformations that both Claire and Sydney go through. And it's a place of mystery too, which reflects, I think, the kind of complicated inheritance they've both received. Because by facing their fears, they're not controlled by them anymore. It's like an act of defiance against the unknown, a choice to say, yes, life is scary sometimes, but I'm going to embrace it anyway.
So when we look at both Claire and Sydney's stories, we see them searching for, well, yes, romantic love, but also a love for themselves and a place where they belong. And they don't find it through some big heroic act. They find it through those smaller internal struggles, through being vulnerable, through healing.
Which takes us back to that quote we started with. Not all heroes are loud. Some quietly grow gardens, teach, and wait. Sarah Addison Allen, in Garden Spells, she shows us that so beautifully. The strength she portrays, it's not about being loud or flashy. It's about resilience. It's about empathy. It's about facing life's challenges with grace and quiet determination. It's about finding that strength within yourself in those moments of vulnerability and building connections that are based on genuine care and respect.
So to everyone listening, think about that for a second. How does strength show up in your life, in the people around you? It's not always the loudest voices or the biggest gestures that have the most impact. What about the people who quietly nurture, who teach, who keep going even when things are tough? Those are the unsung heroes, the quiet gardeners, and they're all around us. So how can recognizing that, how can valuing those quieter forms of strength change the way you see the world, change the way you see yourself? It's something to really think about, and maybe even something to strive for.
We found these 3 quotes, and they're like, whoa, they get to the heart of what makes this book so magical.
Yes. It's all about that quiet strength.
Right.
And about figuring out what safety really feels like. And then this idea that realness, just being yourself, that's where the magic happens.
Exactly. So we're going to unpack all of that for your book clubs, Give you guys some juicy stuff to talk about when you're discussing the Waverly sisters. Their world is just so enchanting.
It really is. And I think what Sarah Addison Allen does so well is she takes these big, heavy emotions and weaves them into this world that feels light and magical.
Right. It's whimsical and charming, but also there's this depth. It's not superficial.
And these 3 quotes, they're like little keys to unlock those deeper layers.
Oh, I love that. Keys. Okay, so the first one. He was just there, like the garden, always quietly waiting, never asking for anything but sunlight. This is about Tyler, right? And his whole vibe with Claire.
Mm-hmm.
But Claire, in the beginning, she's all about control.
Mm-hmm.
Her life is so carefully constructed.
Oh, totally. And the sources we looked at, they pointed out how she's got this fortress around herself. Her catering business, the garden, everything. It's all about order.
Because she's scared.
Right. Deep down, she's so vulnerable. It's like she's afraid that if she lets go even a little, everything will just fall apart and it will be chaos.
Heartbreak City.
Exactly. But then you have Tyler, who is so different from the typical romantic hero. He's not making grand gestures or chasing after her relentlessly.
And not demanding.
Nope. He's just there, steady, supportive, this quiet strength.
Which is almost revolutionary, right, when you think about it.
I know. It's like he gets that real connection can't be forced.
You can't bulldoze your way into someone's heart.
Exactly. Think about it like a garden. You can't yell at a plant to grow faster. You have to give it what it needs. Sunlight, water, good soil, and then let it do its thing.
Patience.
Yes. And that's Tyler. He's like the sunlight for Claire. He's there, offering warmth and support, but no pressure.
And the sources talk about soft love. That's a great way to describe it.
It's so perfect, right? It's not weak. It's strong in this really deep, understanding way.
It's powerful because it allows vulnerability.
Yes, and that's how Claire starts to change. Not because she's forced, but because she feels safe. She experiences that Tyler is consistently there for her.
It makes her walls crumble bit by bit.
It's beautiful, really.
Okay, so the next quote. This one's about Sydney. She had been running for so long, she didn't recognize safety when it stood still. Ugh, this one just hits me in the chest every time.
I know. And Sydney's past. So much trauma.
The abuse.
It makes you understand why she's always running. It's survival.
She's always on alert.
Exactly. The sources talked about how for someone in that situation, you're constantly on edge. You have to be ready to run at any moment. So when she finally gets to a place where she's actually safe,
Her body doesn't get the memo.
it's like her whole system is wired for danger. She doesn't know how to just be still.
So sad.
It really is. But then Henry comes along. He's described as a soft, constant anchor. What a beautiful image, right?
It is. And he is everything her ex wasn't.
The opposite. Our research really stressed this. He's kind, respectful, patient. He doesn't push her.
He doesn't try to fix her.
Nope. He's just this solid presence, that anchor. She can hold on to him and know that he's not going anywhere.
And he's not trying to control her.
Which is huge for Sydney. After being in a relationship where her own will was probably constantly diminished, Henry shows her what it means to have agency, to make her own choices.
It's like he's helping her reclaim herself.
Right. And Sydney's healing, it's not just about getting away from the danger. It's about learning to recognize what real safety is, what a healthy relationship looks like. And Henry is the embodiment of that.
It's beautiful. Okay, ready for the last quote.
Let's do it.
This one's all about the magic. The garden didn't care about appearances. It responded to truth. Okay, so obviously this is about more than just plants, right?
It's about the heart of the Waverly family, their legacy, all the women connected through this magical garden.
And it gives them their gifts.
Right. Claire with her food, Sydney with her beauty and hair magic, and little Bay with her intuition. These aren't just random powers, they're a part of who they are.
So it's not about showing off.
No way. It's about something deeper. This quote says it all.
Yeah.
The garden, it sees right through you. It knows what's real.
Like a lie detector test.
Kind of. If the sisters are being fake or if they're hiding from the truth, the garden reacts. It might go a little haywire.
Because it wants them to be authentic.
Exactly. And this ties into their healing journeys too.
Because both Claire and Sydney have to face some hard truths.
Right. Claire has to admit that she's afraid to be vulnerable. And Sydney has to acknowledge the scars from her past. It's only when they get real with themselves that the garden and their own lives start to really flourish.
There's also the whole thing with the apple tree.
Oh, yeah. At first, it seems like a bad omen.
Right. Like a curse.
But the sources pointed out that it's actually about facing the unknown. The apples, they show you your deepest fear or how you're going to die.
Intense.
It is. But it's also about saying yes to life, even with all its risks.
Because you can't hide from the truth forever.
Nope. So the sisters, just like the garden, have to learn to be brave. To accept that being vulnerable is part of living a full life.
So all these quotes, they're like pieces of the same puzzle. They're about being strong in a way that's not about power or control.
It's about being open, letting go, choosing love over fear.
And both Claire and Sydney, they show such strength in that vulnerability.
Right. Claire choosing to trust Tyler. Sydney letting herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she can be safe with Henry. Those are huge leaps of faith.
And it's the opposite of running.
It's about standing still, being present, and saying yes to connection.
And the love they find with Tyler and Henry, it's not about ownership or demanding anything.
It's that soft love, nurturing, respectful. It allows them to bloom.
And it's all connected to the magic. It's not something outside of them. It's a part of who they are. Their strengths, their honesty, it fuels the magic.
But the garden reflects that back to them. It thrives when they thrive. It's a beautiful cycle.
So for your book club discussions, I think it's cool to think about these images. The quiet garden, the stillness of safety, the truth in the magic. How do those ideas resonate with you?
What do you think about Claire and Sydney? Do you see their vulnerability as strength? Does that change how you think about being strong?
And on a personal level, think about your own garden. What would it look like if you were totally honest with yourself? What needs tending? What needs to be let go of? It says, quote, "In the end, Claire and Sydney chose not the loudest men, but the ones who stayed through the storm. Maybe the quietest kind of love is the most powerful after all. Powerful stuff.
Yeah, it really is. And that's exactly the kind of energy we're tapping into with this deep dive. We're stepping into Sarah Addison Allen's world, her novel Garden Spells, and it's full of magic, literally. But beneath that, you find these really beautiful explorations of healing, the bond between sisters, and yeah, this idea that strength and love, it doesn't always have to be loud.
Right, like sometimes the quiet ones, they're the ones who really pack a punch. So for anyone who hasn't yet fallen under the spell of Garden Spells, it introduces us to these two sisters, the Waverleys. We've got Claire, who's made a life for herself in Bascom, North Carolina, runs a catering business, but with a twist. She infuses her recipes with, get this, a touch of magic from her garden. That subtly influence emotions. She's living a pretty solitary life. And we have her younger sister, Sydney.
And Sydney coming back to Bascom with her daughter, Bay, that's really where the story kicks into gear. See, she's running from an abusive relationship, carrying a lot of baggage from that past trauma. Understandably, she's pretty guarded when it comes to, well, letting anyone in. So yeah, her arrival shakes things up for Claire, throws off that carefully crafted piece she had going on.
It definitely does. Like, at first, Claire is resistant. She seems to really like her routine, her independence, but you can tell underneath it all, there's this deep connection with Sydney that even time and distance haven't completely erased. So the reunion, even though it starts off a bit rocky, it becomes this journey of healing for both of them. They have to confront past hurts and also these very different ideas they have about love, about what it means to feel safe.
And it's so interesting to see how Claire, who's always so in control, how she slowly starts to open herself up to love. Her next door neighbor, Tyler Hughes, he's an art professor, and he just enters her life as this incredibly kind and understanding presence. He's interested in Claire, but it's gentle, patient. He never pushes her, never oversteps.
That's such a crucial point. Claire, she's used to calling the shots, being independent, and Tyler's quiet attention. It really challenges her. It forces her to confront this vulnerability that she's kept buried for so long. And their romance, it's not this whirlwind of grand gestures and passionate declarations. It's slow, steady, built on this foundation of respect. You can literally see her learning to trust him little by little.
And isn't that where the real power lies? It's not about dominance or control. It's about being emotionally present, earning that trust through consistent acts of care, small but meaningful. It's such a contrast to this idea of love as being forceful or overpowering. It really makes you think about all the different ways someone can show they care.
And then there's Sydney. Her journey is all about learning to experience love without fear, which has basically been a constant companion because of her past. She reconnects with Henry Hopkins, a guy from their school days who's always had a thing for her. He's just a really good guy, solid, kind, and he never sees Sydney's past or her strong personality as a threat.
That's what's so striking about Henry. There's zero possessiveness, no desire to control Sydney. And given what she's been through, that's huge. It lets her see that love doesn't have to equal pain or fear, that passion and safety, they can exist together. Sydney's arc is about taking back her own power, but at the same time allowing herself to be loved in this really tender way. It speaks volumes about her resilience, you know?
It really does, and it brings us to this fascinating contrast that Garden Spell sets up. It's this idea of the so-called alpha male, the guy who's possessive, dominant, emotionally closed off. And then you have Tyler and Henry, who represent this different kind of masculinity. They're emotionally available, respectful, protective, but not a controlling way.
And that makes you think, right, why is this emotional availability, why is that increasingly being seen as a strength, not a weakness? Tyler and Henry, they're not on some mission to rescue the sisters or fix them. They create this safe, supportive space where Claire and Sydney can heal on their own terms. They're true partners, not these larger-than-life figures who need to be the center of attention. It's their quiet support that empowers the sisters to take charge of their own lives.
Right. And we can't forget the role the sisters themselves play in their transformations. It's not just about finding these amazing men. It's about their own inner strength, the choices they make to change their lives. For Claire, choosing to let go of control, to embrace vulnerability, that's incredibly brave, especially for someone who's always been so self-sufficient. What do you think drives that shift for her?
I think Tyler's presence, the fact that he's so steady and accepting, it creates this space where she feels safe enough to take that risk. He doesn't pressure her, but his acceptance slowly chips away at those walls she's built up. It's like this slow burn of trust that allows her to face those fears of intimacy head on.
And Sydney, choosing to stop running from her past, to believe that a healthy future is possible, that's equally powerful. I mean, to come back from the trauma she's experienced, it's inspiring. What do you think gives her the strength to finally stop running and confront what she's been trying to escape.
Her daughter, Bay. I think that's a big part of it. Sydney wants to build a different life for her, one where fear and abuse aren't part of the equation. And that maternal instinct, combined with her own deep desire for peace, that's what fuels her decision to face her past and create something new with Henry. And it's so important that their magical gifts, Claire's cooking and Sydney's way with beauty, they're not just for show. They become these tools of empowerment, helping them connect with themselves and the world in their own unique ways. It's about tapping into their inner strength, not superficial stuff.
The garden itself, the Waverly Garden, it's such a powerful symbol throughout the book, isn't it? It represents this legacy of female intuition, generations of magic, and it's this vibrant, ever-changing space, constantly growing and transforming. It's like a mirror for the journeys that Claire and Sydney are on.
Absolutely. And then you have the apple tree. At first it seems like this bad omen, a predictor of hardship, even death. But when you look deeper, it symbolizes truth, though sometimes painful truth that we all have to face. And the fact that the sisters, they don't just accept these truths, they embrace life knowing that there might be storms ahead. That says so much about their resilience. They choose to live fully, even with the knowledge of potential pain.
And as the story unfolds, we see Claire finally surrendering to her feelings for Tyler, letting go of the fear that's kept her guarded for so long. And Sydney opens her heart to Henry, actively choosing to build a future based on safety and mutual respect.
Yeah.
It's a world away from her past.
In the end, Garden Spells wraps up with Claire and Sydney strengthening their bond as a family, becoming closer than ever before. Their relationship is built on love, for sure, but also on choice, on making conscious decisions. And that subtle magic that weaves through their lives, it plays a huge part too. And seeing Bay growing up in a home where the women are so strong, where they've chosen this path of, well, what we might call soft strength, that's really powerful.
So we come full circle back to that quote. In the end, Claire and Sydney chose not the loudest men, but the ones who stayed through the storm. Maybe the quietest kind of love is the most powerful after all. It just perfectly captures the essence of their individual journeys and how much they've grown together.
It really gets you thinking, doesn't it? In a world that often seems to prize those big displays, those over-the-top gestures, there's something incredibly powerful about that quiet, steady presence. The strength to be gentle, patient, to offer support without the need to control or dominate, that's something special.
And that brings us to you, dear listener. As you've journeyed with us into Garden Spells, into the lives of Claire and Sydney, have you ever found yourself overlooking someone who possessed that quiet strength? Maybe someone who is consistently there for you, but in a less flashy way. Has this exploration shifted your perspective on what true romantic strength looks like, what it really means?
We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you agree that soft men, the kind of men we see in Tyler and Henry, if you believe they represent a real and often underestimated form of strength, drop a saw in the comments.
And as you move through your own relationships, your own encounters, think about this. Perhaps true strength isn't about grand pronouncements or showy displays. Maybe it's about that quiet resilience, that unwavering support and presence through all of life's ups and downs, through the storms. It's definitely something to ponder.
We hope this deep dive has given you some new ways to think about garden spells. We always love hearing from you guys.
Yeah. Tell us in the comments what stood out to you. What parts of the book really grabbed your attention? We love learning from your insights. Happy reading, everyone. And until next time, keep those pages turning.
Bye, everyone.